Wake up, guys. It is Sunday, January 18th, 2026, and the world we knew yesterday? It's gone. For the last 70 years, the global financial system has rested on one assumption: the United States and Europe are friends. They fight, they bicker, but when push comes to shove, they are on the same team. Well, as of this morning, that assumption is dead. And if you have money in the S&P 500, if you're holding European exposure, or God forbid, you're trying to buy a house this year, you need to listen very carefully. President Donald Trump has just gone nuclear. Not literally, but economically. In a move that makes the trade wars of his first term look like a playground dispute, Trump has announced a blanket 10% tariff on our closest NATO allies, the UK, Germany, France, the Nordics, effective February 1st. Why? Because they won't let him buy Greenland. Yes, you heard me. We are back to this. But this time, it's not a joke. It's not a meme. It is an ultimatum. Trump has explicitly stated that unless a complete and total purchase of the world's largest island is signed, sealed, and delivered, those tariffs ramp up to a catastrophic 25% by June. He's treating the sovereignty of a NATO ally like a distressed asset in a Manhattan real estate deal. And the Europeans? They aren't laughing. They are mobilizing. We are looking at the disintegration of the Western Alliance, a potential constitutional crisis in the US Supreme Court, and a trade war that could send inflation spiraling back to double digits. Today, we are peeling back the layers of the Greenland gambit. We're going to look at why the US is so desperate for this ice sheet, why Europe is willing to risk economic suicide to defend it, and most importantly, exactly what this means for your wallet. Buckle up. The timeline just got dark. Let's look at the raw data. This morning, Trump dropped the hammer on social media. He is targeting a specific coalition of refusal: Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland. Note who is on that list. These aren't enemies. These are the countries we rely on to contain Russia. These are the countries that buy American debt. And starting February 1st, everything they sell us gets slapped with a 10% tax. Trump's rationale? It's classic transactionalist philosophy. He was quoted aboard Air Force One saying, "You really need title," as they say in the real estate business. He claims the US needs Greenland for the Golden Dome, a next-generation missile defense system that is currently in early-stage development. According to Trump, the physics of this system, that angles, meets, and bounds, require absolute US ownership of the land to function against Russian or Chinese hypersonic threats. He's saying, bluntly, sell us the land, or we break your economy. Now, looking at this through a geopolitical lens, you can almost see the brutal logic. If you believe World War III is coming, you want the high ground. And in the Arctic, Greenland is the ultimate high ground. It is the unsinkable aircraft carrier of the North. But here is where the rubber meets the road. Europe isn't playing ball. French President Emmanuel Macron has called this unacceptable. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who, remember, represents a country that desperately needs a US trade deal post-Brexit, has called it completely wrong. But the scariest quote comes from Brussels. Simone Tagliapietra at the Bruegel think tank said, "The Pandora's box of tariffs has been reopened, and the stakes are higher, with an unprecedented level of brutality." Brutality. That is not a word you use for a trade dispute. That is a word you use for war. And make no mistake, this is a war. It's a war of attrition. Trump believes Europe is weak, divided, and dependent on the US military umbrella. He thinks that if he squeezes the German auto industry and the French luxury sector hard enough, they will force Denmark to sign the deed. But what if he's wrong? What if Europe decides that sovereignty is worth more than BMW sales? We are seeing something unprecedented: European soldiers deploying to Greenland. Germany sent 15 soldiers. France sent 15. The UK, Sweden, Finland, they are all sending officers to the island. You might say, who cares? It's 50 guys in snowsuits. No. In military strategy, this is called a tripwire. By putting French and German boots on Danish soil in Greenland, they are signaling to Washington, if you come for Greenland, you go through all of us. This is NATO allies drawing a red line against the leader of NATO. It is geopolitical insanity. Okay, let's pivot to the money. Why should a guy in Ohio or a family in Toronto care about who owns a block of ice in the Arctic? Because tariff is just a fancy politician word for tax on you. Let's break down the supply chain nightmare that is about to unfold. The list of targeted countries includes the heavyweights of the global economy. 1. The inflation resurgence. We just spent the last 4 years fighting inflation. The Fed finally got it under control. Now, Trump is pouring gasoline on the embers. A 10% tariff on German engineering, French wine, British finance services, and Dutch electronics means prices go up. Period. Importers do not pay tariffs, consumers do. If this escalates to 25% in June, we are looking at a cost of living shock similar to the post-COVID spikes. 2. The pharmaceutical bomb. Look at the target list: Denmark. What is Denmark's biggest company? Novo Nordisk. What do they make? Ozempic and Wegovy. Half of America is on these drugs for diabetes or weight loss. If a 25% tariff hits Danish exports, the price of critical medication in the US skyrockets overnight. Insurance premiums go up. The cost of healthcare, already the biggest drain on the American wallet, gets heavier. 3. The tech stranglehold the Netherlands is on the list. Why does that matter? ASML. ASML is the most important company you've never heard of. They make the machines that make the chips that go into your iPhone, your Tesla, and your NVIDIA AI processors. If we start a trade war with the Dutch, and they restrict exports or raise prices in retaliation, the AI boom hits a brick wall. NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, these stocks are priced for perfection. They are not priced for a transatlantic trade war disrupting their supply chain. 4. The trade truce is dead. Remember July? Trump and the EU signed a truce. Washington imposed 15% on some goods, 50% on steel, but they were negotiating. That deal is now incinerated. EU lawmakers, led by the European People's Party, are practically shouting that a deal is not possible at this stage. This means the EU is going to retaliate. They aren't just going to take this. They have anti-coercion instruments, a legal framework they built specifically to fight economic bullying. They will target US exports. They will target Kentucky bourbon to hurt Mitch McConnell's state. They will target Harley-Davidson. They will target US tech services. If you work in a US export sector, your job is now on the line. It gets messy. We have to look at the machinery of how Trump is doing this. The president can't just wave a wand and raise taxes, usually. The Constitution gives Congress the power to tax. But Trump is using the IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. This is a law designed for terrorists and rogue states like Iran or North Korea. Trump is using it against the United Kingdom and Germany. He is declaring that Denmark's refusal to sell land constitutes a national emergency. Here is the kicker: the Supreme Court is currently reviewing a landmark case regarding this exact power. We are waiting on a ruling. This creates a massive binary risk event for the stock market. Scenario A: the Supreme Court rules against Trump. He loses his authority. The tariffs vanish. The market rallies. But then, knowing Trump, does he ignore the court? If the executive branch ignores the judicial branch, we have a constitutional crisis. Markets hate that. Scenario B: the Supreme Court upholds the power. Trump has unchecked economic authority. He can tariff anyone, anytime, for any reason. This fundamentally changes the risk profile of investing in the US. The White House is reportedly weighing a backup plan called Section 122, which allows for temporary tariffs to fix balance of payment deficits. But those are capped at 15% for 150 days. Trump wants 25% permanently. Section 122 isn't enough for the art of the deal he's trying to broker. This legal uncertainty is poison for business investment. If you are a CEO, do you build a factory today? Do you sign a contract with a French supplier? No. You hoard cash. You wait. And when money stops moving, the economy stops growing. We need to zoom out. This isn't the first time the US has shocked the system, but the parallels are terrifying. Think back to the Nixon shock of 1971. Nixon unilaterally ended the gold standard and slapped a 10% surcharge on imports to force currency revaluation. It worked, sort of, but it also ushered in a decade of stagflation, stagnant growth and high inflation. Trump is pulling a Nixon, but on steroids, and against allies who are much stronger and more united than they were in the 70s. Or go back further. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. The US tried to protect its industry with massive tariffs. The world retaliated. Global trade collapsed by 66%. It turned a recession into the Great Depression. I'm not saying we are heading for a Great Depression, but we are certainly heading for a great fragmentation. The tragedy here is the timing. We are in a Cold War with China. We are in a proxy war with Russia. Basic strategy dictates that you consolidate your alliance. You keep your friends close so you can fight your enemies. Trump is doing the opposite. By demanding Greenland to fight Russia and China, he is alienating the very countries we need to fight Russia and China. Andreas Schwartz, a German lawmaker, summed it up perfectly: international law cannot be changed by tariffs. Europe feels like it is being blackmailed. And historically, when European powers feel threatened, they dig in. They don't fold. The UK's position is particularly tragic. They left the EU seeking global Britain. They wanted a special relationship with the US. Instead, they are getting hit with the same stick as the French. Starmer's comment that they will take up the matter with the US is diplomatic code for "we have been betrayed." So, where does this go? I've run the simulations, and I see 3 paths forward. You need to position your portfolio for these. Scenario 1, the art of the deal win. Trump's pressure works. Denmark realizes it can't afford the economic hit. They agree to a sale that is disguised as a 999-year lease with sovereignty transfer. Trump gets his golden dome. The markets rally huge on the removal of uncertainty. Defense stocks go to the moon because of the new infrastructure build-out in Greenland. Investment play, long US dollar, long defense, long US construction. Scenario 2, the stalemate and slow bleed. The tariffs hit February 1st. Europe retaliates with targeted tariffs. Inflation ticks up to 4 to 5%. The Fed has to raise rates again, crashing the housing market. The trade war drags on for months. We get a recession light. Investment play, cash is king. Short consumer discretionary. Gold acts as a hedge against the chaos. Scenario 3, the NATO collapse. This is the nightmare. The EU and UK refuse to budge. Trump escalates to 25% in June. Europe responds by pulling support for other US initiatives. Maybe they stop enforcing sanctions on China, or they kick US troops out of bases in Germany. The Western security architecture crumbles. Global supply chains fracture completely. We see a 20% correction in the S&P 500 as earnings from Europe evaporate. Investment play, Bitcoin, physical gold, and oddly enough, emerging markets. We have to touch on why Trump is doing this one last time. The Golden Dome. He mentioned that if we don't buy it, Russia or China will. He's not entirely wrong about the threat. The Arctic is melting. New shipping lanes are opening up. It is the Suez Canal of the 21st century. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state. They want in. Greenland is rich in rare earth minerals, neodymium, praseodymium, terbium. These are the vitamins of modern industry. We need them for EVs, for wind turbines, for F-35 fighter jets. Currently, China controls the supply. Buying Greenland is about breaking China's chokehold on the future of technology. So, in Trump's mind, a 10% tariff on German cars is a small price to pay for securing the next century of American dominance. He is playing 4D chess while Europe is playing checkers. But the problem with 4D chess is that if you knock over the board, nobody wins. If he breaks the NATO alliance to secure the minerals, who is going to help us defend them? Listen, the days of boring, predictable economics are over. We are in an era of geoeconomic warfare. The boundaries between national security and economics have dissolved. Your Apple stock is now dependent on a diplomatic dispute over an ice sheet. Your mortgage rate is dependent on whether the German chancellor blinks. Here is my advice. 1. Watch the Supreme Court. That ruling on IEEPA is now the most important economic event of the quarter. 2. Diversify out of the Eurozone. If this trade war heats up, the euro is going to parity with the dollar or lower. European stocks will suffer. 3. Hedge for inflation. Don't believe the Fed if they say this is transitory. Tariffs are inflationary. Look at commodities, look at energy. The West is fighting a civil war over Greenland. It sounds absurd, but history turns on absurdities. Trump has thrown the gauntlet. Europe has picked it up. February 1st is the deadline. Tick-tock. Thanks for watching. If you want to survive the financial winter, smash the like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the comments.